Spiritual shortcuts. Are they possible? Are they available? Do we want them? So let me talk briefly today about spiritual shortcuts, and especially something called spiritual bypassing, which is sort of a subcategory of this. We live in a society of instant gratification. Isn't that true? Would you agree? Take this pill and lose 20 pounds in 3 weeks. Subscribe to my channel and pay me a few $1,000, and in 3 weeks you will reach enlightenment. Sounds almost a little bit too good to be true, and if it does sound like it, it probably is. So all of us on some level, once we engage on the spiritual journey, we do want to progress, we want to evolve, we want to get closer to the divine of our understanding, whatever we call it. And yet I wonder, are there really shortcuts that will do away with all the work we have to do? And sorry to say, I don't think they exist. Now, as we progress on our spiritual journey, that state of enlightenment that is much talked about, of course, may be a very desirable state. And really, maybe it just is that our vibration gets higher and higher and higher until we are no longer so defined by this three-dimensional world. But I honestly believe, and I've done some research on that, that in the end, we have to work for it. And it's a more gradual process. We are composed both of shadow and light. If we were only good, only light, we probably would have grown wings by now. So we have to acknowledge the dark aspect inside us too, and consistently work on understanding it, embracing it, and changing it as it is in our power to do so. When people commit to spiritual shortcuts, well, hello. That's Trixie, by the way. She's a very curious cat. All right. So sometimes in their desire to create shortcuts, people will unintentionally perhaps engage in spiritual bypassing. Now, what does that mean? I'll give you a quick definition. It refers to the tendency to use spiritual ideas, practices, or beliefs as a way to avoid or bypass dealing with unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, or painful life realities. So, in other words, we cannot run away from processing what life offers us. And sometimes it may be trauma, a challenge, a difficulty, a betrayal. All of that is part of the human experience. But sometimes people think that if they just offer a quick little phrase, like, oh, it'll all be okay, God will take care of it. And there's nothing wrong with these phrases per se, but they cannot be offered instead of or a replacement for being genuinely present with the experience. I once had actually an experience to where I was in a wheelchair after a very long and arduous illness, and I attended a seminar in my wheelchair. At the end of the seminar, somebody came up to me and said, he wanted to know what had happened. I briefly explained, and then he said, so have you forgiven yourself for that? And I just looked at him. What do you mean, forgiven myself? And he said, well, you created that. And in that moment, I was just totally baffled. And I got very angry. How dare you telling me that I created all of that? And while, of course, on a deeper spiritual level, we are co-creators with the divine. In that moment, that phrase was cold, heartless, lacking in compassion, And all it did, it made me very angry. So that's an example of spiritual bypassing. The man probably meant well, but we need to be listeners and be present with our own trauma and with that of others. And sometimes just that presence is enough. We don't need to spew out little phrases that may sound good in the moment. You know, when somebody is dealing with a loss of a loved one, they, in that moment, when it's all fresh, they don't need to hear, oh, there are no accidents in God's world. Tell that to a mother who just lost her son to an accident. She's not ready to hear a little smooth little phrase like that. So I encourage you to avoid spiritual bypass. And yes, there are some shortcuts that are available, but we cannot control them. We can't make them happen. And that's what I call a moment of grace. And that moment of grace can come unexpectedly, or even when we're in deep crisis. And all of a sudden, there is some inexplicable energy that lifts us very high up. So that can be considered a shortcut, but again, we can't make it happen. It's up to the divine to offer that to us. So I want to close by saying a very short phrase that in a way sums up. Don't walk away from the hard work. Keep up your meditation, your prayers, your compassion, help others. And in that short phrase, I want to say, clean house, of course your internal house, trust God, and help others. In a nutshell, that's it. Thank you.